Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Beitzah Daf Lamed Gimel contains one Mishnah about halfway through the Daf, but the entire Daf is on the topic of using wood for various activities on Yom Tov. And it's a muktzah related issue. Wood generally has only a function of being used to burn things. Wood is firewood, so that's what you use it for on Yom Tov. You're allowed to put wood in a fire on Yom Tov to burn. The question is, if you want to use wood for something else, or if you had wood which you wouldn't necessarily use as firewood, is that permitted? Because what you're doing is you're changing it from one use to another use. If wood's only function is fire and you want to use it for something else, you're changing its use. Changing its use is a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, a classic machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, whether that's permitted or it's an isser of muktzah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that's muktzah. You can't make a new use in an object. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's permitted as long as it was useful for something. You can use it for something else. So this is going to run throughout the daf here. And the Gemara will have a Mishnah in between that brings up the topic of other situations of wood, such as wood which you couldn't even use for firewood, and how that would play out in the halachas of muktzah. So we begin on the second line of the page. The Gemara is commenting on our last Mishnah, which had said that you cannot use pieces of wood to prop up a pot, so that if you want to cook the pot and you need something to raise it up so that you can get a fire under it, you can't use a piece of wood to do that, and you also can't use a door. So Gemara asks, why would anybody prop up a pot on a door? Are you going to rake the door? Gemara says, no, what we mean to say is you can't prop up a door on a piece of wood. Just like you can't prop up a pot on a piece of wood, you can't prop up a door on a piece of wood. The Gemara explains the reason by quoting a Beitzah. The Gemara says the Beitzah says you cannot rest a door or a pot on a piece of wood because wood is only considered to be functional to burn. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, you cannot use it as a tripod or something to hold things up because that's not its function. You can't create a new function. It's muktzah, creating a new function on Yom Tov. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's permitted. Since it has a function of being firewood, you can give it a new function. Another one comments on the next line in the Mishnah. You cannot drive an animal with a stick on Yom Tov. Now, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon says that that's permitted. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, this would seem to be, again, a machlokes about muktzah. And the question is, are you allowed to use the stick as a animal guide instead of just a piece of firewood? And therefore, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, who says it's permitted, is going like his father, Rabbi Shimon, who says that it's permitted because he doesn't hold that it's a problem of muktzah to change a use from firewood to a animal driving rod. The Gemara says that no, that's not what's going on over here. It's not about muktzah at all. Muktzah is not the issue. This is a machlokes about whether it's an appearance of driving animals to the market. If you drive an animal with a stick, does it look like you're taking him to the market to sell, which would be also on Yom Tov? And Rav Shimon himself would say that it's also because it looks like you're driving him to the market. Okay, now the Gemara is discussing some other pieces of wood which might have other functions. The Gemara discusses a chazo, which is a piece of wood that's long and thin and sharp on one end. It could be used as a spit. You could poke it through a piece of meat so that you could roast a piece of meat. So Gemara says machlokes Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes. Rav Nachman says it's usher to use it as a spit. Rav Sheshes says it's permitted. Now the Gemara has two versions of this. What is the case in the machlokes? Is it in a moist, fresh piece of wood, or is it in a dry, hardened piece of wood? What is the machlokes? Now it's definitely more likely to be permitted in a dry piece of wood because that is more functional as a piece of firewood. So the Gemara's first version is that the machlokes is in the case of a dry piece of firewood, and in the case of a fresh piece of wood, everybody agrees that it's usher. So according to this version, a fresh piece of wood is too moist, you can't burn it in a fire, it won't burn. Everybody therefore agrees it's usher because it has no function, it's not even firewood. Dry piece of wood is a machlokes. Can you use it for a spit if it is intended to be burned in the fire itself? So according to the Madhyama, that's permitted. He doesn't view using it as a spit and using it as firewood as different functions. Both of them, the key point of the function here is you want to roast a piece of meat. Either you want to burn it in the fire so that you'll have flame to roast meat, or you want to have the meat stuck through it so that you can roast a piece of meat that way while something else is burning. It's the same function to roast a piece of meat, and therefore it's permitted. Now, the second version is that everybody agrees that this is not muktzah because of that svara. The question is, do you view a fresh piece of wood as something which is burnable or not? Well, according to Rav Nachman, no, because you can't burn it in the fire. It's too fresh, it's too moist. According to Rav Sheshes, says yes, because if you had a very big fire, you would be able to throw it in there and it would dry out and it would burn. The Gemara says the halacha l'maaseh is that a dry piece of wood you are allowed to use for a spit, and a moist, fresh piece of wood you are not. Okay, now Rava said halacha. Rava said a woman is not allowed to go into a pile of wood and take a stick in order to use it to scoop out ashes from an oven. Again, it would seem to be the same svara, that you're changing a piece of wood from being a piece of firewood to being a functional tool. You can't do that on Yom Tov, Muktzah, like Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. He says further, if you have a piece of wood which was already designated to use to scoop out ashes from the oven and it breaks, you cannot burn on Yom Tov now because you're changing it the other way. You're changing it from a shovel to being a piece of firewood. So the Gemara says it seems like Rava is going like Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, how does that fit with Rava's statement elsewhere? Rava has told his servant, roast a goose for me, and throw its intestines to the cat. Throwing the intestines to the cat is changing its use from being people food to animal food. As long as it was part of the goose, it was people food, because it's considered to be part of the goose, which is clearly meant to be eaten by people. And you throw it to the cat, it becomes animal food. He says, no, that's talking about where he knew from before that he was going to shecht it, and that those innards would become disgusting, and therefore he had in mind all along that it would be fed to the cat, and he always viewed the innards as cat food. Okay, this ends Gemara's comments on the Mishnah. Now we get to our next Mishnah. This Mishnah discusses where you have tiny splinters of wood which are scattered. Can you consider those useful or not? They're hard to pick up and to collect. So it'll depend where they are. Is it in your house, and your house is easier to collect, or is it out in your yard where it's much more scattered and it's much more of a problem? So the Mishnah says Rabbi Eliezer holds that you are allowed to gather sticks, little thin sticks from anywhere, whether it's in your house or it's in your yard. The Chachamim disagree. They say in your house you're allowed to gather it. If it's in your yard, you're not. If it's in your yard, it's too scattered. It's not even firewood. That's Machlokas number one. Machlokas number two is, are you allowed to use it for some purpose other than firewood? Rabbi Eliezer says yes, you could use it to pick your teeth. Chachamim say no. So therefore, according to Chachamim, you're only allowed to gather sticks from your house, not from your yard, and only to use it for firewood, not for anything else. The second half of the Mishnah goes to the topic of creating a fire, lighting a new fire. The Gemara will explain that's an Isser of Moiled Eish. You are creating a new fire where no fire existed before. Creating something new is Asar and Yom Tov Midrabanan. And the Mishnah says you're not allowed to create it in any of many ways of creating it. You can't create it by rubbing two sticks together, from knocking two stones together. You can't create it from the dirt. Rashi explains there's a way to create it from hard dirt. You can't create it from shingles. Can't create it from water. Rashi again explains how you do that. You put a glass in water, the sun shines on it. Rashi explains the procedure. And you also cannot heat up shingles so that they'll get very hot and you'll be able to roast things upon them. Now begin the Gemara, which discusses making a kli out of pieces of wood, making a functional item out of it. Gemara begins with the statement of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that anything which is animal food, something which animals eat, there's no isser to make it into a kli. Because it's already functional, there's no problem of making it into a kli. Would not be ever an isser if you turned it into a kli. Now, what kind of kli could you use it for? Usually, it's going to be a toothpick to clean your teeth. That would be the kli you would create it. So the Gemara says, "Rav Kahana had a kasha to Yehuda." This kasha is from a Beitzah. It says what you're allowed to do with besamim sticks, sweet-smelling twigs. And we're going to show that these twigs, which Rashi explains are sometimes could even be animal food, so these twigs have an Issa D'Oraisa to create into a toothpick. And therefore that would be a kasha on Rav Yehuda. So what does the Beitzah say? So Beitzah says that you're allowed to move samim sticks. They're not considered to be mukta. You're allowed to smell them. You're allowed to wave them in the air to create smell to help a sick person. You're allowed to roll them between your fingers so that they crack up a little and smell better. You're even allowed to you're allowed to smell it. What you can't do is break off the end in order for it to smell better. And the reason you can't do that is because it's a gzeira that if we allow you to break off the end in order for it to smell better, you may break off the end in order to make it into a toothpick. And making it into a toothpick is an issa d'oraisa, so breaking off the end and even to smell it would be an issa d'rabanan. So Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda was impressed with the kasha. He says, look, if you'd shown me somewhere that it was also d'rabanan, would have been a kasha on me, because I said it's mutter. You're even going so far as to show me that it's also d'oraisa, so it's a good kasha. But the answer is that there's two types of animal foods. There's animal food which is hard, and there's animal food which is soft. And there are spice sticks, there are smelling sticks, which are similarly hard and soft. And I was talking about soft ones, and this Bryce is about hard ones. Hard ones, there is an issue to create it, to make it into toothpicks. I was talking about soft ones. Gemara says that the Bryce is talking about hard ones, and how can I say you roll it between your fingers, make it smell better? Hard ones won't waft more smell if you roll them between your fingers. Someone says it's not a problem. You just have to add a line into the Brysa or read it as if the line was there. And the first part is talking about soft, and it says you're allowed to roll it between your fingers and smell it, and cut off the end if it's soft. But if it's hard, you're not allowed to cut off the end. Then this is the Rabbanan to smell it, and this is the Raisa to make it into a toothpick. Now, in a similar vein, the Gemara quotes two contradictory Brisas. One says you're allowed to cut off the end to smell it. One says you're not allowed to cut off the end to smell it. This is Rabbanan. The Gemara says there's Zera, Zera, Chizda, not a kasha. One's again talking about hard. One's talking about soft. Hard ones would be aser. Soft ones would not be aser. So now the Gemara has a kasha. Why would hard sticks be aser to create into a kli? What's the problem? You're creating into a kli without intending to make a kli. You're just intending to make it smell better, to have the smell exude from it. So the fact that it ends up looking like a kli is not what you intend. It should not be aser. We find a similar halacha in case of somebody who's breaking a barrel to get figs out of the barrel. So by breaking the barrel, he's also making a nice hole in the barrel. He's making it into a functional barrel which has an opening in it. So we have a brisa that says you're allowed to break into the barrel as long as you don't intend to create a nice opening, and that's not aser. Furthermore, says Gemara, Rava bar Rav Ada and Ravin bar Rav Ada both said we were nasa Rav Yehuda and used to break off branches of good scented trees and give us, and that would be again giving us something to be able to smell. But by breaking off the branches, it made something useful. It made a handle for an axe. So you see that you are allowed to break things and make certain things if you do not intend to make a kli. So Gemara says it's not a kash. It's a machlokes of Elazar and the Chachamim. And the Gemara quotes a brisa. Elazar says that a person is allowed to take thin sticks from his house in order to use them as his toothpicks. The Chachamim say you're not allowed to take it from your house. You're only allowed to take it from a animal's food trough. Both of them agree that you should not pick them off. You should not cut off the end. And if you cut off the end in order to make toothpicks or to hold a door open, so then it's a machlokas where there's a difference between Shabbos and Yontif. According to Rav Elazar, on Shabbos is a Isser Deraisa Chayav Chatas, and on Yontif it is only an Isser Derabanan. According to Chachamim, both of them are only an Isser Derabanan. So it comes out then that according to Rav Elazar that it's an Isser Deraisa on Shabbos. So here on Yontif it would be an Isser Derabanan, and in case where it's Eina Miskaven, you're not intending to do that, you're just intending to make something that smells good. So then that would be permitted. According to the Rav Elazar that it's an Isser Deraisa, then it would be forbidden even in a situation where it's Eina Miskaven, you're not intending to do that. Another more says that according to Rabbi Eliezer, what are you going to do with that brisa, which we said before, that says you're allowed to break open the barrel to get to the figs. So you want to say he doesn't hold to that barrel. He doesn't hold to that brisa. He wouldn't be allowed to do that. And says no. He'll have to say that that's talking about a very weak barrel. It's made of shards of barrel that are glued together, so it's not really a functional object. So even if you make something out of it, it doesn't really count as an isser. Gemara refers back to the Mishnah where it's seen that you are allowed to, at least according to one opinion, you are allowed to gather twigs from the yard in order to light a fire. So Gemara quotes a brisa that has a machlokes between a Shimon and a Tanakama. Are you allowed to make big piles of it? The Tanakama says no, and Shimon says yes. What's a machlokes about? The Gemara explains, does it look like you're piling it up for after Yom Tov? According to Tanakama, it does never also. According to Shimon, the fact that you have a pot that's cooking on it shows that you're clearly doing it to cook and not for any other reason. And the Gemara just explains what's the reason that you're not allowed to make a fire. Like we said earlier, because it's Moiled Eish, you're creating a fire on Yom Tov, which you're not allowed to do.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.